Hey there, welcome to MurderTube. So for our very first video, we're just going to dive right into the deep end, and we're going to talk about a case that's extremely tragic and extremely disturbing. And this is a case of two 10-year-old girls that went missing. This case is going to take us to the year 2002 in the town of Soham in Cambridgeshire, England. On the 4th of August, the two young girls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, were attending a family barbecue at one of their houses. These girls loved the football team Manchester United, and the day that they went missing they were wearing matching Manchester United football shirts. This picture that you can see was taken just a couple of hours before they actually went missing. So a little after 6 p.m. that evening, the girls went out into the neighbourhood to go explore and play, and this was a neighbourhood that they were already pretty familiar with anyway because they had grown up in this area. Around 8:30 p.m. Holly's parents went out to check on the girls and couldn't locate them anywhere. Of course the panic sets in immediately, so some of the friends and family get together and form their own kind of search party to look around the town and try and find these girls. With the girls still missing, at 9:55 p.m. the police were called and these girls were officially reported as missing. The police launched an immediate search effort, and these search efforts continued for multiple weeks. We're talking over 400 police officers working full-time on this, as well as hundreds of volunteers flocking the area trying to help in any way that they can. The police would go door to door in the town asking questions. They would try and obtain any surveillance footage they can, try and piece together any information to figure out where these girls were last going, where they were last seen, just anything that could help in these search efforts. Also, suspecting that these girls had been kidnapped, the police interviewed every registered sex offender in the entire Cambridgeshire area, although it would really lead to nothing, and all of those individuals would be eliminated as suspects. On the 5th of August, the day after the girls disappeared, one of the local residents in the Soham area by the name of Huntley had offered information voluntarily to the police and the media that he had seen the girls shortly before they had gone missing.
How do we know they were here at 6:50? Well, we have an eyewitness. Huntley here is a familiar figure. Evening, Ian. You're the school caretaker. The girls, Jessica and Holly, would know you, and they saw you on the front doorstep. What went on?
I don't know the girls. I stood on the front doorstep grooming my dog down. She'd run away and come back a bit of a mess. They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was, as she used to teach them at St Andrews. I just said she weren't very good as she hadn't got the job. And they just said please tell her that we're very sorry, and off the walk in the direction of the library over there.
Ian lived in a house in Soham with his girlfriend Maxine Carr. Ian worked as a caretaker for a local college, and Maxine Carr worked as a teacher, and she had actually also taught the two young missing girls. So of course, being the last known person to see the girls alive at this point, Ian was a person of interest, and a police officer did conduct a brief search of Ian's house. When speaking with Ian's girlfriend Maxine Carr, she confirmed Ian's account of the events that had happened. The girls just briefly stopped by and then they proceeded off towards the direction of the library, and Maxine stated that she was home at the time. She had kind of seen and heard this happen. So with his alibi checking out, Huntley wasn't a person of interest too much anymore, although the intention would turn back on him pretty quickly. When the police officer had searched the home of Huntley, there really wasn't any major evidence found, but there was a few little things that stood out as suspicious to the officer. One of them was there was some clothing on the washing line in the yard, even though it had been raining recently. Another one was that some of the floor in the house seemed to be thoroughly cleaned, which Ian said to the officer that was due to a recent water leak that they had. And lastly, Ian's behavior in itself just didn't quite sit right with the officer. On top of that, during the 2 weeks following the disappearance of the young girls, as these search efforts continued, Ian just continued to raise suspicion with some of the police officers. He would often ask questions that most people, you and me, aren't really going to be asking. He's constantly asking for updates on how the searches are going, how far is the perimeter going to go, and even asking questions such as how long does DNA evidence last? Yeah, that's just a little bit suspicious. So on the 16th of August, Huntley and Maxine Carr were both brought in for questioning, and this questioning lasted for several hours. During this same day, the police conducted searches of Ian's home, his car, and the college where he worked. It was clear that Ian's car had been extensively cleaned, although the officers were able to get little traces of dust and concrete in the tire wells as well as on the pedals. On top of that, the trunk lining in his car had been removed and replaced with a piece of carpet. When the officers conducted search of Ian's place of work, there was some major evidence located. The clothes that the girls were wearing the day that they disappeared were found cut and charred in a barrel in a workshop where Ian worked. Ian's fingerprints were found on this barrel, as well as fibers on the Manchester United shirts that were found, matched fibers on Ian Huntley's body as well as his clothes. And as for Maxine, the police had received statements from people in a nearby town of Grimsby that Maxine's car was actually in that town during the day the girls disappeared. Further to this, one individual in Grimsby stated that when Ian came to pick up Maxine on the 6th of August, 2 days after the girls went missing, Ian was staring in the trunk of his car, just pale and shaken, and Maxine was stood next to him, her head was down and she's crying. So with all this evidence mounting against them, during the police interview, Maxine confessed that her initial statement was a lie. She was not home when these girls stopped by, she doesn't know what Ian spoke to them, what happened, she just made that up to protect Ian. But due to being afraid of being falsely accused, the couple agreed to this lie of Maxine being there and witnessing this so that she could help provide him with an alibi. Ian began to refuse to answer any of the questions the police would ask him, but he would also start to appear to be confused, distant, not really there. Even during this interview, he was drooling from the mouth numerous times. So due to these mental illness signs he was showing, he got admitted into a mental hospital where he would undergo an extensive mental health assessment. In the early afternoon of August 17th, in a town called Suffolk, about 13 miles away from Soham, 2 bodies of young girls were found in a ditch. These bodies were partly burned and they were in a badly decomposing state. The police were confident that these were the remains of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, although it wouldn't be until 4 days later when DNA would confirm that it was those bodies. The investigation in this area also confirmed that the parts of dust and concrete found on and inside Ian's vehicle matched that of the road that was leading up to the location where these bodies were discovered. Due to the condition of the bodies, a cause of death could never really be determined with certainty, although it's always been believed that it was due to asphyxiation. With all this evidence against them, and now with the bodies found also, the police laid charges against the couple. Ian was charged with 2 counts of murder, as well as 1 count of perverting the course of justice. Maxine Carr was charged with 1 count of perverting the course of justice, and she would later on receive 2 additional charges of assisting an offender. After nearly 2 months of evaluation with a forensic psychiatrist, it was determined that, although he's psychopathic, Ian didn't really have any major mental illnesses, and he's perfectly fit to stand trial. During preliminary hearings, Ian entered not guilty pleas to both murder charges, although he did enter a guilty plea to the charge of perverting the course of justice. Maxine entered not guilty pleas against all of her charges. Prosecution were able to show evidence that the girls were murdered inside the home of Ian Huntley, and that within 12 hours of being killed, the bodies were placed inside Ian's car and transported to the location in Suffolk. They were also able to confirm that Maxine was not in Soham during the time of the girls' disappearance. During testimony, Ian admitted that both girls died at his house, but he claimed that the deaths were unintentional. According to Ian's story, Holly Wells did have a nosebleed, so they came into the house. While he was trying to help her, he slipped and accidentally knocked into Holly, which made her fall into the bathtub. The bathtub just so happened to be full of water, as Ian had been washing his dog. He goes on to say that because Jessica witnessed him knocking into Holly, she began to freak out and was claiming that Ian intentionally pushed her, and due to her screaming and shouting and wanting to phone her mum, Ian panicked and he tried to cover Jessica's mouth to stop her from screaming and to stifle her screams. As he was trying to stop her from screaming, he accidentally suffocated her. And then when Ian went back to the bath to check on Holly, she had unfortunately drowned by that point. He claims that because he was worried that the police and the public would not believe that the deaths were an accident, he started to panic, and that's why he was then destroying of evidence, disposing of the bodies, coming up with these lies. And he would even go on to say that he did not attempt to feign insanity, but rather the weight of the girl's death on his mind, as well as being in police presence, just kind of made him go into this temporary seizure, and that's why he was acting in that mental state that he was for, the weeks after his police interrogation. During Maxine Carr's testimony, when she was asked why she assisted Ian in extensively cleaning the house, she said it was because she's just always been obsessed with tidiness. She would also go on to say that she only lied to the police and the media as she did believe that Ian was innocent, and she was worried that he would be falsely accused or that he could lose his job, and she just wanted to protect him. She said that had she known or believed that he did actually murder these young girls, she would have been horrified. 1 month after the trial began, the closing arguments for both prosecution and the defense were made to the jury. The jury deliberated for 4 days before reaching their verdicts against both defendants. Ian Huntley was found guilty of both counts of murder, for which he was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 40 years being served. Maxine Carr willingly pled guilty to perverting the course of justice, but she continued to insist on not being guilty of assisting an offender. The jury believed Maxine's claims of innocence and found her not guilty. So Maxine was only sentenced to 3.5 years for perverting the course of justice, of which she served half, and then she was released on parole. So Maxine is now free, and she has a completely different identity to help protect her. So were the deaths of these girls just an accident like Ian claimed, or was there a different motive going on there? Well, Ian's motive for the murder has never really been revealed, however, it is always strongly believed to have been sexual in nature. After all this attention was brought on to Ian Huntley, his criminal history came into light. Ian had numerous accusations against him in the previous years for sexual assaults. And these sexual assaults included people of all ages. We're not just talking people over 18, there was numerous for people under the age of 18 as well. Some of these were violent sexual assaults, and some of these were more consensual, if you want to call it that he had relationships with girls under the age of 18 while he was over. And one of these relationships that he had even resulted in a girl just 15 years of age giving birth to his daughter. Unfortunately, due to a combination of some of these cases, the police not investigating well enough, some of his relationships where the girls refused to submit criminal complaints, and then some cases where there was just insufficient evidence to secure a conviction, Ian was never convicted of any of this stuff, and he was never registered as a sex offender. If he was, and these tragic deaths of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman likely could have been avoided. Due to the conditions of the bodies when they were found, being partly burned and badly decomposing, it was impossible to say whether any sexual assault had taken place. This was a tragic case of 2 10-year-old girls that were needlessly taken away, and this case impacted the entire country. I personally don't believe that these deaths were an accident at all, but I would like to know your thoughts on this as well. So let me know in the comments, do you believe Ian's story that this was just an accident and that he panicked? And also, what about Maxine? Do you think that she did actually believe Ian was innocent and she just wanted to protect him from any wrongful accusations? Or do you think that she knew what Ian done and she was trying to help him cover it up? Like the video if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, and be sure to subscribe to the channel as we will be bringing you these videos twice a week. It's a crazy world out there, guys, so stay safe.